This week, we air a pre-recorded interview with Zane Lackey, Chief Security Officer at Signal Sciences, and we talk about advising. In the leadership and communication segment, customer surveys are no substitute for actually talking to customers. CEOs most concerned about cybersecurity in 2019, the open workspace doesn't work, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending your assets? Have you penetration tested your public assets? Start 2018 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting at blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night. How much confidence do you have in your security program? Trusted Sec is a global information security consulting firm created by Dave Kennedy with some of the industry's most respected professionals. Their team works collaboratively with your company to improve security regardless of its current maturity level. Trusted Sec offers an ever-growing list of customized services including red and purple teaming, software and hardware security, incident response, PCI, and risk and maturity assessments. You can visit trustedsec.com/security weekly to learn how Trusted Sec can become an extension of your team.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 114, recorded January 21st, 2019. It is Martin Luther King Day. I am your host, Matt Alderman, here in Colorado, getting ready for another snowstorm tonight. And today I am solo. Paul is home with the kids and probably celebrating a victory yesterday after one heck of a game with the Patriots and the Chiefs. RSA Conference 2019 is the place to be for the latest in cybersecurity data, innovation, and thought leadership. From March 4th to 8th, San Francisco will come alive with cybersecurity's brightest minds as they gather together to discuss the industry's newest developments. Go to rsaconference.com/security weekly-US19 to register now using the discount code 5U9SWFD to receive $100 off your full conference pass. Security Weekly will be in Broadcast Alley on Monday and Tuesday of RSA Conference this year, recording both sponsored interviews and hosting briefings. We'll be sharing more details soon. Also, check out our on-demand material. Some of our previously recorded webcasts are now available on demand at securityweekly.com/on-demand. All right, so I get to debate the articles all by myself this week. And so I pulled some interesting ones that I could use to kind of debate myself, I guess, a little bit. And the first article I pulled was make sure morale doesn't suffer when a favorite team member leaves. And look, we've all been in this situation. When you work in startups and you work in large organizations, you're going to have turnover, right? You're going to have team members that you like, that you've worked with, they leave. And I've seen a lot of this in my career. We were just actually having a conversation with this with one of my advisory clients earlier this morning on how do you help the team keep their morale up when this happens in an environment. And this article points out a couple really good things that I thought was interesting. One, show appreciation for the one that's leaving, no matter the circumstance. Sometimes they're leaving because they want to. Sometimes it's the best for the organization for that person to leave. But show appreciation for that person that's leaving. It's a respectful way for that person to leave. It creates a good environment for the team itself, which I thought is something that's really important here. The other tip that came out of this was answer questions with transparency and respect. Why are they leaving? Just be open and honest about it. I'm a big believer in trust and being open and honest. I think it's good when employees leave to answer questions and make sure people understand why they're leaving, and treat that person with respect as they leave. And then, this last tip, which is kind of obvious, invest in the health of your team, right? Identify, areas as part of this dialogue of, how they feel about it. What can we do to improve the work environment if that's why they're leaving or whatever it is. But again, when a person leaves, you got to typically go replace that person. And it's hard to go out and recruit, hire good talent, train them, bring them up to speed. And so, you want to build that health across the entire team because you don't have to do this often. I think it gets really hard for organizations as they continually have to try to replace some of those key personnel in the environment. So some very interesting tips here when an employee leaves. All right, my second article is how to debate ideas productively at work. And I pulled this one out because I'm not very good at this sometimes. My career has been interesting when it comes to debating ideas and in different aspects, right? We all have kind of our beliefs in what a company should do. Sometimes the company does it, sometimes they don't. And that's typically why I leave organizations or have left in the past is, you kind of get to a point where you don't think you can move things forward anymore. So how do you share ideas productively and don't end up in some of those situations? So I thought this was a good refresher for me, but might help some other leaders out there as they think about how do we move ideas forward in an organization. And the first one is, look, we're all on the same team. That's obvious. But I think what's important is we have to treat each other with respect on that team. And as we look at introducing new ideas and concepts and directions for the company to take, it should be for the benefit of the entire organization, for the whole team, and not just a personal reason. And so obviously that kind of makes sense across the board. But it's the second one that I think is probably the one that's really, really important. And that is keep it about facts, logic, and the topic at hand. Sometimes we get a little personal. I always like to back up directions with facts. If there's an idea that we should do something new or expand into a different area, you want to bring facts and logic to the table to present that idea. It shouldn't be a gut instinct. It should be really factually based. And if we do that, then we can support those ideas and hopefully move them forward. Now, there are times when organizations, even with the facts, decide not to move forward with a specific idea. As executives and leaders in the company, we just have to acknowledge that and move on. And sometimes that's hard, sometimes that's easy, but that's where I've typically seen friction when you try to bring some of these ideas to light. And then the last one is, don't make it personal. I'm not very good at this sometimes. Sometimes it gets a little personal, and we should watch that. But it's a good idea. Try to keep it all about the business. Don't try to make this about an individual, whether it's you or about somebody else, when you're pitching these ideas and concepts. It's just a really good idea to try to keep it at the business level. In our industry, specifically in security, we don't want to burn bridges. Our industry is small, right? And if we can, keep it at a business level and understand from a business perspective, we don't agree, that's fine. But try not to make this personal. So just some good tips on how to productively share ideas within an organization. Let's see, my next leadership article, I love this one. Customer surveys are no substitute for actually talking to customers. I'm a big believer in this one. We tend to want to use surveys because it's easy. We can craft a single survey, send it out to a number of customers, collect the results, and then try to understand some trends out of it. That's a good way to collect some broad-based data, but it's not a substitute for actually sitting down and talking to the customer. And there's a number of examples in this article, but I can also bring some articles, some experience myself. One of the things that I did when I was at Tenable, I visited a lot of customers throughout the world. It wasn't just North America. I mean, I traveled over to Asia 3 to 4 times a year. I traveled into Europe and the Middle East, at least a handful, times a year, really to sit down with customers and understand what are they looking for. And when you sit down with a customer and you ask them open-ended questions, you tend to get a lot more detail and a lot more information than a survey can ever provide you. And so I think it's invaluable to be able to go out, sit down with customers and have a dialogue, really understand what problems are they facing? What are some of the areas that they can or can't find solutions for? Just simple things. But it comes across so much easier when you're sitting down and talking to them face to face instead of just trying to read some results out of a pre-canned survey. Because in a pre-canned survey, it's really hard to ask the open-ended questions that allow a lot more data to come to you if you just listen to the response and let them talk. I think is a great way to do it. So if you're looking for feedback from your customers, go out and talk to them. It's the best way to get some of that valuable feedback. All right, let's see. What else do I have up here today? This one is interesting a little bit, and I brought this article up only because my former boss is going. So Davos, world leaders need to grasp future technological risks. So I saw an article last week that Renaud Derson, co-founder at Tenable, my former boss over at Tenable, is actually going over to Davos as part of this dialogue. I think it's great that cybersecurity leaders are going over to talk to other world leaders about technology and technology risk and the challenges with cybersecurity. We need to be able to communicate not only with world leaders, but even just our business leaders to really understand the risks of what the technology revolution is doing. What are the risks associated with cybersecurity as we go through digital transformation? This is an event that, great, we'll get some world leaders there, but I think this is important in general, is that we've got to continue to have dialogue with our business leaders and our governmental leaders to really understand where some of these risks are in the future. So Renaud, good luck. I hope you have a great dialogue over at Davos. All right, next one, CEOs most concerned about cybersecurity in 2019. Look, I think we know this instinctually in our industry, is that cybersecurity is a concern. What's interesting is cybersecurity this year ranks the highest of all the CEOs concerned. And I think this is the first time it's actually happened. Let's see, it was a survey of more than 800 international CEOs and 600 C-suite members, where cybersecurity was ranked number one for the top external threat concern for the CEOs, which, wow, we're finally there. We're finally at that level where, people realize cybersecurity is a threat. The U.S. government found that cybersecurity costs the economy $109 billion in 2016. We know that number's higher now. That's the last time we saw this data. And what I thought was really interesting is we beat out, because creating new business is the second largest concern for global CEOs. So if you think about that for a second, cybersecurity is the top risk. Growing the business is the second risk. That's the second top concern. Typically, that's been reversed, right? It's always been about creating new business. But I think what CEOs are starting to realize is that in order to create new business, they have to continue to evolve through this digital transformation that we've been talking about for years. That digital transformation now opens us up to cybersecurity concerns. And now we're actually ahead of revenue generation, which, like I said, that's the first time I've seen this in my career where security ranks above the business. So maybe some good news for us in the cybersecurity space and for budgets this year, but definitely we're on the list for CEOs. Let's see, what did I pull next? Oh, I love this article. The open workspace doesn't work. We know, if you ever walk into a new startup, you'll notice the layout of a startup is very different than a traditional enterprise organization, right? So if you go to a typical enterprise, you'll see cubicles everywhere. You'll see some offices along the walls, but you'll see cubicles everywhere. But at a startup now, the trend is no, it's all about the open workspace. And you walk in and it's literally just tables and monitors. There's no divides, there's no partitions. It doesn't exist. That's the new rave. And a lot of people think that that open workspace promoted better collaboration and happiness. It was more cost effective, which it probably is, and it prevented or alleviated pain because it allowed you to move and stand and have more motion. This article goes in and talks about two of these three aren't true. The first one is about collaboration. It doesn't necessarily promote better collaboration. One of the challenges with an open workspace, according to one of these surveys in this report, is that individuals don't want to constantly interact with their peers. They sometimes want to not interact. And so sometimes the effect of an open workspace is people are more kind of inside themselves. They don't collaborate. They don't want to talk to people. They kind of want to zone themselves out because it's constant. They kind of go back and are a little more introverted in that way. I thought that was interesting because one of the benefits of supposedly this open workspace is that you can constantly collaborate. The second one is around preventing pain or alleviating pain, because now you can have your treadmill at your desk, and so you can walk while you work and all these other things. But surveys have also shown that's not actually true either. That they are still seeing a lot of potential pain and other health ailments, even in this environment. So this article just kind of says, look, the open workspace doesn't necessarily work. And so I think it's up to each organization to decide whether this is a culture they want to create or not create. I personally don't like them because I'm on the phone a lot, and having open conversations on the phone just doesn't work. So I'm not a big fan of these open workspaces, but I know a lot of startups use them to try to create that culture that they're looking for in the startup environment. So food for thought. All right, now we're going to get into a few other articles. I always like to try to throw in some job talent stuff. I'll throw in a little technology at the end. But Gartner came out with a report, talent shortage, a key concern for organizations. I think we've covered this a few times. Yes, we have some talent shortage, not only in cybersecurity, which is one of the top ones. Cloud computing, we've talked about a number of times. Artificial intelligence skill sets. There is a shortage of skilled resources traditionally in our market. Cybersecurity has had a shortage for years, and now we're seeing that move over into some of these new upcoming technologies as well. I think this is great for people who are looking for a career change. If they're looking to specialize, there are some very interesting areas of specialization out there that would allow people to shift, I think, pretty easily in their careers if that's what they wanted to do. Survey of 137 senior executives by Gartner, accelerating privacy regulation, so still a lot of demand for regulatory compliance type resources, cloud computing, which we've talked about. Further down in here, it talks about artificial intelligence and some of the other shortages that we're seeing in the industry. So that's healthy for us as job seekers and for anybody who's looking to get into the space. All right, and my last article here is on technology. And this one I pulled over, this one talks about open source to open newer avenues for CIOs in 2019. And there's a couple pieces in here I want to touch on. There's a couple things I agree with in this article. In general, I do as a whole, but there's a couple areas I kind of wanted to point out. And so the first topic in this article talks about digital business to accelerate interest in artificial intelligence. Okay. Yeah, I get it. But what does that have to do with open source? And they don't get into the open source aspects of artificial intelligence the way I thought they would in this particular article, because I'd like to see what types of open source projects are out there and direct people to some of those a little easier for people who are looking at artificial intelligence projects. but it wasn't in this article. There were some really good ones, though, around open source for open data for business intelligence. There are some projects, community data license agreements that was announced by the Linux Foundation that are working on some open source projects for open data to help improve business intelligence types work. I thought that was a really interesting place for people to look as they're looking to enhance some of their data analytics and intelligence work on the data side. They do talk about IoT and edge computing in here and how it will turn towards a real-time operating system. They talk here about OpenStack. I actually think the container market is where we'll see a lot more activities, at least with edge computing. IoT, we all know, will be some sort of lightweight firmware-based operating system. Some standardization around that, I think, is important. But when I see new edge computing environments, I'm seeing them move to more containerized, serverless types of architectures, not necessarily an OpenStack deployment, for example. And so I actually think we'll see a lot more serverless container infrastructure in these new edge environments, especially when we're looking at things like industrial IoT, plants, planes, all these kind of new edge environments. I think that's what you'll see more than maybe OpenStack is a full-blown solution. It does talk a little bit about software approach to enterprise storage. I think we're going to continue to see new enhancements in the storage side. We're going to continue to add data. How do we make that easier across the board? And the last one, which is near and dear to my heart, is prepping security with DevSecOps. I've talked on this topic for probably a good year and a half of how to integrate security into DevOps and how can we do it without creating a lot of friction for the developers or the operations staff. It's a lot harder than just saying we need to prep security for DevSecOps. We actually need security and the DevOps teams talking more frequently. We need to figure out how to integrate new security tool sets into existing DevOps tool sets and processes if we really want to realize the DevSecOps movement. A lot of people talk about it, but I don't think many people truly understand what needs to happen to integrate security in. Number one, for all you security folks out there listening, developers will not log into your security tool. You have to take that security data, integrate it back into their tools, whether it's Jira or HipChat or Slack. Those are the tools developers use on a day-to-day basis. And if you want them to see your data, you need to really figure out how to integrate your results back into some of those tools they're using. We want to figure out how to integrate with their build systems. We want to figure out how we integrate with other aspects of that CI/CD pipeline. And if we figure that out, we can actually realize the DevSecOps vision, but it's going to take some time and it's going to take a lot of dialogue. And even though I love it in this article, I just don't think they fully understand what it's going to take to make this happen. So those are my articles for the week. We'll take a short break and then we will air our pre-recorded interview with Zane Lackey.